See, understand something, Steve. I'm much older than most people probably in the radio business, and I grew up in a different time. So my views are not that of today, and I have to admit that. I'm not going to pretend that I'm 39 years old. I'm not. But the few men that I knew who were gay when we grew up became gay because not only were they attracted to men, but they wanted rampant, unlimited sex at all times with whoever they wanted it. And the last thing they wanted was to be wrapped up into a marriage like their parents. They didn't want to be restricted into such a boring, traditional life, by the way. I never understood where the gay marriage thing came from to begin with. But then you're telling me that this is becoming somewhat of a norm today, where so many gays are not in it just for the wild, crazy, rampant, let us say, sex with anyone kind of thing, but they're actually in it to find someone to live with. Isn't that what you just said?
Yes, and I think you need to talk to a psychologist about repression and all that. I'm not a doctor. I'm not going to pretend to be a neurosurgeon or a psychologist or anything like that. And I don't know everybody in the community. But at that time, it seems to be where you were repressed, and you were looking for that opportunity to fulfill that, you know what I mean, that desire. Now we don't have that. With the normalization, with the ability of people to go out and live as they want to, they're calmer. So they aren't hyperactive, you know what I mean? When I go out with my partner, we sit side by side when we're at a booth eating dinner. We're not big on the PDA thing. I don't like holding hands in public. I think it's weird.
Well, hold on. That's very interesting. It's funny you should mention that. In San Francisco, it's rather a norm, but you still have some of the people from out of town who move here, and they feel it's their obligation to kiss in front of a straight couple or in front of children. They do it just for shock value, which I find to be very pedestrian, by the way, and so out of town, it's unbelievable. I mean, most straight people don't find it necessary to kiss in front of strangers.
Well, it's because it comes natural. Now, you're talking about people, everybody at one point in their lives kind of dealt with, I'll speak from my perspective. I've dealt with, the should I live this way kind of phase, and I came to terms with it, and I'm comfortable with it, but I still don't feel comfortable putting it out there in front of people that don't feel comfortable with it, because I'm kind of sensitive to how I am with other people. And there's a lot of gay people that are like that, too. A lot of gay people don't want to be judged. They want to live their own lives. They want to be left alone. So the idea that a lot of the gay people, when you see 30 elephants, okay, you can see 30 elephants, and if one's white, you're going to notice a white elephant. You know what I mean? I don't, if you can understand the analogy.
No, I follow what you're saying, but to gay people today are almost invisible. By the way, not like in my day where people took on extreme roles to express their particular sexual orientation. I mean, you see guys who look like regular guys. They look like guys. How do you know they're gay? How does anyone know anymore?
I don't know. I mean, it's all in the social networking thing. I can't speak for that. But my point about it all is that people just want to be left alone, and I don't understand why people would behave that way. I don't see a lot of it. I mean, I've been to pride parades, and you see a lot of crazy stuff go down, and that's embarrassing in itself. Not for me, but for the people that are doing it. I don't attach myself to that.
Well, you see, now that's an interesting statement unto itself, and I don't want to over-politicize the sideshow here, but in San Francisco, you have a crazy element here of a leather parade where people march, they whip each other in public, they do the most horrendous things you can imagine to each other in public, and Nancy Pelosi says it's perfectly fine, it's part of her value system as a Catholic. That's crazy. How could you whip somebody in public and call that a normal value?
Well, that's that part of the country. Now, if you come to the South, you know what I mean? Like I'm in Raleigh, and these areas here, people are much more tame. They're much more relaxed. And while they're not afraid to make themselves known, you know what I mean, by attending these events, they're not going to do that stuff like they do in San Francisco. I've been to San Francisco. I've been to Seattle. There's a lot of bad stuff out there in general. You're talking about, like, drug addiction, like the skeezy hippies up there in Seattle that, started that riot on Martin Luther King Day. That kind of stuff. That's just how those people are. Well, some of those people are out there. So it's very.
But you're saying it's not related to the gay community directly, has nothing to do with it.
It's an event where certain people go. There's gay people that don't go.
But your bottom line is, as a gay man living in a rather conservative Southern community, you're opposed to gay marriage. That's your main message, right?
Yeah, the main message is that not everybody wants gay marriage. A lot of gay people don't want gay marriage. A lot of people just want to be left alone. If you want to...
So what your main point was well made right from the beginning. You don't need the government to tell you it's okay to be married, to be gay, basically.
Right.
Well, that's an interesting point of view. You actually took it from a different point of view, which is that by permitting gay people to be married in the same way as heteros, you're actually creating a restriction upon gay people that they currently don't have.
Absolutely.
Well, Steve, I'm again always surprised by the callers I get, and when I change gears as I did today to a new topic, I get callers I've never had before. But I assume that this is not the first time you've listened to this program.
I've listened to you a couple of times. I don't really listen to a lot of talk radio, but when you're on, I stick to the dial.
Well, I'm always on. You got to understand that. It's just that it's when you catch me. But as someone who's always on, I'm sending you a free copy of my new novel, Countdown to Mecca. There's no sexuality in it whatsoever. It's about the threat to all of us from the Islamo-fascists. 855-407-2882. Here's a quick news break. I don't know if it's bad. Bill Clinton's plane has engine trouble. Bill Clinton's plane makes unscheduled landing in Tanzania. Plane carrying former President Bill Clinton made an unscheduled landing in Tanzania after a problem with one of the plane's engines was identified. The engine was repaired and the aircraft was on the ground at the Dodoma fueling station. Clinton was traveling in the East African nation, to visit projects. In other words, to escape the heat of the book that's coming out. The plane is a Canadian turboprop Dash 7, was traveling from blah, blah, blah to Lake Manyara, which is blah, blah, blah. And, of course, he's there to give us the agriculture, health, education. Yeah. He and his daughter Chelsea are also scheduled to visit. In other words, they got out of Dodge while the heat got too hot. They put their daughter up front last week. Do you remember? That was an embarrassment. They chose Chelsea as a spokesperson. It was like watching a puppet of Hillary. It was almost bizarre. It was frightening. It was as though Hillary has channeled her voice through the daughter, and they both got both of them out, Chelsea and Bill. When I come back, all the latest breaking news on all the topics, and we'll continue our discussion on the Supreme Court and your opinion on gay marriage right here on the Savage Nation.
Join the Savage Nation. Call now, 855-400-SAVAGE, 855-400-7282. Savage.
My Savage Nation is sponsored by SwissAmerica.com. It's the only company I trust to protect my wealth. Call 800-BUY-COIN. Well, here's a shocker. There is a threat of civil disobedience if the Supreme Court legalizes gay marriage by Christian leaders. They said we will not obey. Huge story. A blunt warning from prominent religious leaders to the Supreme Court that if they cross that line, and I'm quoting now, they're going to engage in civil disobedience. They said, while there are many things we can endure, redefining marriage is so fundamental to the natural order and the common good that this is a line we must draw and one we cannot and will not cross the pledged states. And it was signed by Huckabee, Rick Santorum, Pastor John Hagee, Franklin Graham, etc., and many others. The pledge was co-drafted by Deacon Keith Fournier, a Catholic deacon, and Matt Staver, the founder of Liberty Counsel. There were others involved, and I don't have to read them to you. But here's what they said. We are sending a warning to the Supreme Court and, frankly, any court that crosses the line on this issue of marriage. Once same-sex marriage is elevated to the level of protected status, they say, it will transform the face of society and will result in the beginning of the end of Western civilization. They go on. You are essentially saying that boys and girls don't need moms and dads, that moms and dads are irrelevant. Gender becomes pointless when government adopts same-sex marriage. It creates a genderless relationship out of a very gender-specific relationship. It says that it doesn't matter and that two moms and two dads are absolutely equivalent to a mom and a dad. They have a lot more to say. I'll continue this discussion for another full hour on this program because it is a key point in the future of America.
Join the Savage Nation. Warning. The Savage Nation contains adult language, adult content, psychological nudity. Listener discretion is advised. And now, America's most exciting radio talk show, The Savage Nation, home of unprotected talk, borders, language, culture. And here he is, Michael Savage.
Okay, well, the word marriage has meant one thing to some people, and others want it to mean another. And the Supreme Court is arguing over the legalization of same-sex marriage. The religious right is saying it would destroy our civilization as we know it. And here's their argument. They said the legalization of same-sex marriage could fracture the nation. Quoting now, Dobson goes on to say the institution of marriage is fundamental and must be defended. It's the foundation for the entire culture. It's been in existence for 5,000 years. If you weaken it or if you undermine it, the entire superstructure can come down. We see it as that important. And that means the possibility that Christians will engage in acts of civil disobedience. He went on to say, I'm talking about civil disobedience, as Mr. Staver. I'm talking about resistance, and I'm talking about peaceful resistance against unjust laws and unjust rulings. And they're saying that people should not recognize the legitimacy of that ruling if it comes down, because it's not grounded in the rule of law. They need to resist that ruling in every way possible, in a peaceful way. They need to resist it as much as Martin Luther King Jr. resisted unjust laws in his time. They claim that there's going to be a constitutional crisis and civil disobedience if the Supreme Court rules adversely from their perspective on same-sex marriage. They said there's no option whatsoever. And they want pastors across the nation to sign the pledge. And he's talking about the outrageous penalties being assigned against people of faith simply because they don't want to participate in a same-sex union. Did you know that an Oregon bakery is facing a $135,000 fine? Christians, they are, for refusing to make a cake for a lesbian wedding. And a Washington State florist faces fines for refusing to participate in a gay wedding. He went on. Dobson says, Christians are being declared the lawbreakers when we are simply living by what we have always believed and by a set of laws that the culture historically has agreed to. Right now, the courts are changing the playing field and declaring that what the natural eye can see and natural law reveals is not truth. What will we do and how will we respond? He said through civil disobedience. Dobson went on to say there's no doubt that LGBT activists are targeting Christian business owners. He's quoted as saying, for about 50 years, the homosexual community has had its goal to change the culture, to change the ideology, and if necessary, to force people who don't agree by use of the courts, Dobson said. He went on. He said, I think there's a collision here, and we can all see it, and where it's going to go is anybody's guess, but it is serious. And so they're demanding that there be civil disobedience in the Christian community should the Supremes tilt in favor of gay marriage. And we've been talking about it for 2 straight hours without let up for good reason. It's been going on, this argument, for a long time. The Supremes are tilting against it, apparently, according to CNN, if we can believe anything CNN publishes. But by the sound that we have played, and we're not going to play all 4 of them again, I think I have to go back to this swing voter, because as you well know, the court is equally divided, and there's always been a swing vote in the form of Justice Anthony Kennedy. So let's listen to Anthony Kennedy and his opinion thus far in his oral arguments in clip 30.
When you think about these cases, you think about words or cases, and the word that keeps coming back to me in this case is millennia, plus time. This definition has been with us for millennia, and it's very difficult for the court to say, oh, well, we know better.
Well, that's the swing voter, and because of that, CNN is saying, uh-oh, it looks like we're in trouble. So I think it's time for me to open it up to the callers again, because this is a very big hot button issue. Big issue. And most thinking people are tired of looking at the civil unrest in Baltimore. They're sick and tired of the whole situation there. They know what they feel. They know what they see. They know who did it. They know what needs to be done. They know that it's out of control because of the mayor and her policies telling the police to stand down. And the proof is in the pudding. Proof is in the pudding. The minute the National Guard came out with guns, the animals suddenly behaved. I know you don't want to hear the word animal, but I'll use it again anyway.